to the course on Counseling and Communication Skills, brought to you by AllCEUs.com. In this course, we're going to identify basic counseling communication skills, including different words that may help you develop a connection with your client, especially when he or she is in crisis. We'll identify the ABCs of assessment, identify the types of crises that consumers may present with, and discuss the characteristics of a crisis. Finally, we'll develop an on-scene triage method for assessing the current needs of a client in crisis. By the time clients come to us for the first time or even for the third time, they are often in some level of crisis. When you first meet a client, you want to present yourself in a non-threatening but caring manner. For children, this means getting down to their eye level, not leaning over towards them. For adults, it means respecting personal and cultural boundaries. Don't step too close, don't stand too far away, don't make too much direct eye contact if that is not appropriate for someone of that culture. Establish boundaries and limits of confidentiality early on. Let them know that you're not going to make them do anything. You may provide suggestions, but they're the expert on themselves, and your job is to help them figure out how to make their tools work a little bit better. Again, with limits of confidentiality, it's extremely important that you tell them what you're going to have to tell other people. There's the typical, if you say you're going to hurt yourself or others, or if you admit that you've been abusing an elder or a child, or you admit that you know of child or elder abuse. We have to report that. But in many cases, we're working with consumers who have been referred to us from a third party, such as the courts, in which we have to keep them in the loop of what's going on with the client. One of the things I found that's helpful with my involuntary clients is to let them know at the very beginning, and they all know that I'm going to be telling their probation officer what's going on. But also to work with them to develop their progress note each week. That way they know exactly what their PO is seeing, and there's no misconceptions. We can talk about what's going on, and they can see very objectively how much progress or lack of progress they have made. And finally, ask the client what brought him or her to this point. Why are they here? Help them describe what's going on in their life. Now that you kind of know where you're standing, we move into verbal crisis de-escalation. You want to define the problem. Listen to identify the person's orientation. Get a feel for where they're at. Where are they oriented? Are they in the now? Are they living in the past? Are they foreseeing the future and gloom and doom of something that's going to happen? What are their feelings or solutions? And listen to their words to figure out if they're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Now, what do I mean by that? If they use a lot of words like, I see this is happening, the writing was on the wall, I could read people's intentions. These are visual learners, and they're going to be able to comprehend more that is presented to them visually or written. Auditory learners talk about hearing things happening and sounds. And kinesthetic learners talk about actions and reactions and things that have been done. Now, that's just one little thing that can help you sort of tweak your verbiage so the person connects with you a little bit more. I see where you are coming from might be something you could say for someone who is visual, or I hear what you are saying to someone who is auditory. Empathize in order to see the problem as the client does. I had a mentor one time who explained the difference between sympathy and empathy. And he said this: you have a child that's stuck down at the bottom of a dark, wet, cold well. Can't get there. Emergency services is on their way. but that kid is stuck good. Sympathy is leaning over the edge of the well and going, wow, looks pretty dark and scary down there. You know, I'm up here and, you know, everything will be all right and the ambulance will be here soon. Sucks to be you. Empathy is when the rescue worker straps on rappelling gear, goes down the well as far as it is safe. You don't want to put yourself in danger. Goes down the well as far as it is safe and actually experiences how cold and wet and dark it is and is there, if they can, to hold the child's hand. This is what we do as counselors. We strap on that rappelling gear and we go there with them. But we have the tools to pull ourselves back up. It's important to ask open-ended questions. Tell me what happened this morning that before you came to the bank and took everybody hostage. Or tell me what happened this morning before you felt like you wanted to kill yourself. Pay attention to verbal and nonverbal messages if you can see the person. Make sure they're in sync. If their affect is flat, pay attention to that too. At that point, they may be resigned to committing suicide. Or they may just be thinking. But it's important to get a read on both the verbal and nonverbal. Use your ABCs, and this is not REBT ABCs. It's another set. Assess their affective state. Where are they emotionally? Calm? Off the chain? Angry? Sad? What's going on? Behavioral functioning. Are they standing there? Are they cutting themselves? Are they pacing around in circles like a caged cat? Cognitive functioning. How logical and rational is their thought process? And the severity of the crisis. What is their suicidal or homicidal intent? Have they made a plan? Do they know how they're going to do it? Do they know when and where? Do they actually have the means to kill themselves available? Now, we all have the means to kill ourselves available if we're in any average house. We've all got butcher knives, and we can find glass to break and anything. There are always ways that we could injure ourselves. Generally, people who make a plan have a particular way they've conceptualized of killing themselves, and they are going to stick to that particular way unless they feel cornered. So ask them, if you're going to overdose, do you have the pills in the house? Always inquire about whether there are firearms in the house. People are a lot less likely to stab themselves or slit their wrists if that wasn't their initial intention than they are to shoot themselves with a gun, because a gun tends to be, theoretically, faster. Do they have future plans? Are they talking about what they're going to do tomorrow or what they want for lunch? Any time in the future is better than nothing. Sometimes it's hour by hour. Sometimes it's day by day or week by week. I remember when I volunteered at the crisis center, we'd have people who would call in anonymously, and the best you could get was to get them to promise you that they would still be alive and that they would answer the phone when you would call an hour later. And you would do that all night long until you could get them the help they needed in the morning. Are they putting their affairs in order? If you're talking to someone who says they're suicidal and you can hear their dog yipping in the background, assuming they're not planning on taking their dog with them, then you can think that there's a good chance that there's some ambivalence to work with. Once they start finding homes for their pets and giving away their possessions and saying goodbyes, they've pretty much made up their mind. Provide support. Use thinking words such as you're stuck, you're at your wit's end, you're out of options, things seem out of control right now. You can use feeling words for people who seem to respond better to those. You're overwhelmed, you feel helpless and hopeless. Some people don't like using feeling words. It makes them feel even weaker. So assess your consumer to figure out what type of verbiage they're more comfortable with at this particular time. Ensure client and personal safety. If it's possible, remove the client from the situation. Try to get them in a place where they are safe. Let the client know you want to help, but it's hard for you to focus while blah, 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 blah. Try to propose a solution that does not take away his power. You know, it's hard for me to focus while you're waving that gun around. Maybe you could put it down. Propose a solution that makes the client feel like they're still in control. Maintain an environment free of hazards such as scissors, letter openers, heavy objects, even staplers, anything that can easily be grabbed and used as a weapon. Always maintain a clear path to your door, preferably with 2 methods to get there. So you can get around your desk either way. You can get to the door all the time. You don't want the client between you and the door. Do not meet with clients in isolation. Now, we all meet with clients one-on-one, but don't meet with them one-on-one in an empty building at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. For psychological safety, remove bystanders. Bystanders can be negatively impacted themselves, but having an audience also adds fuel to someone's fury. If they feel like they're being cheered on or feel like they've got an audience. Most of us have worked with consumers who de-escalate the minute you get them out of a room full of people. Reframe the situation with the client not being bad. Reframe the situation to make the client feel like you understand that he or she is doing the best that he can with the tools that he has at this point in time, and you want to help him through this situation, not that he's doing something stupid and you need to help him fix it. You know, real different perceptions of those 2 statements. Again, when you're talking, when you're working with somebody who's a visual learner, I see that this, and this. I see that you're trying to do the next right thing. I see that you've tried these 3 things and they haven't worked. You look like you're wanting help, but nobody's paying attention. Let me try to pay attention and help you through this. Hearing. I hear that you've told 7 people what's going on and then transferred every time. You sound angry. Doing would be you want, you regret. These are not deal breakers, but if you can practice them in your sessions or in your practice sessions or when you're talking with your spouse, you'll get better at using words that are more appealing to the different learning styles, which fires up whole different sections of the brain. Acting. Acknowledge the situation and or the client's feelings. In order to act, you need to know what's going on. Seek help from the client in understanding what's going on. Ask open-ended questions. Ask them to tell you what's going on. Own your feelings. Clients in crisis may be in crisis, but a lot of them
when they're in crisis, are more acutely aware of your reactions, especially your negative reactions. So it's important to own your feelings. If you're feeling frustrated or you're feeling helpless, that might be something, and I say might, it's not always true. You need to use your clinical judgment, but it might be something to bring up to the client because he may be projecting those feelings of helplessness or frustration onto you. Be aware of transference and countertransference reactions. These are huge and emotionally charged situations. Be aware of them and turn them around so you have control of them. Convey understanding, but don't say, I understand. Because you know what? You don't. The client doesn't even understand. That's part of the problem. I hear what you're saying. I see that this behavior is an attempt to try to make things right. But don't say you understand. Identify their feelings. You are just completely beside yourself right now. You are enraged. You are whatever. And the client will say, yeah. It communicates the same thing as I understand without putting yourself out there and trying to tell the client that. Provide positive reinforcement for positive behaviors. Avoid value judgments. Just because you think suicide is wrong doesn't necessarily mean the client does. Set limits and do not tolerate controlling or aggressive behavior. Many times when people are in crisis, they're at their wits' end and they've regressed in a certain way and they need limits. Don't be ugly. Don't be nasty. Don't be over-controlling. But set limits with the consumer about what you're willing to tolerate and exactly what can happen. Reduce tunnel vision and increase focus. A lot of times when people are in crisis, they get tunnel vision, and that's all they can see is that one problem that doesn't seem to have a solution or doesn't seem to have an end. Helping them broaden their focus can help mitigate the crisis situation. Examine alternatives to the current behavior, such as supports they have, coping mechanisms, and thinking patterns that they might be able to change. Promote mobilization by making plans and helping them implement order. When people are in crisis, they feel hopeless and helpless, and everything feels very chaotic and out of control. People in crisis don't remember anything because everything's chaotic and out of control. Help them write things down, implement order, and make plans. Make an action plan for the next right thing to help them get out of this crisis. And obtain commitment with assertion statements such as, I need you to do this. I need you to hang up with me, go to the emergency room, and call me when you get there. Or I need you to hang up with me and sit right there on your couch until the ambulance can get there to pick you up. The definition of a crisis includes the fact that people are facing an untenable obstacle to their life goals. Their life cycles are significantly disrupted, and the person has no response in their repertoire to deal with the situation. So a person feels hopeless and helpless. That's the short version. There are 6 basic fears that create a crisis very often. The unknown. They have no idea what's going to happen now. or how they're going to survive something, or how they're going to solve something. They've lost control or power over their own lives or over their dreams or something. They feel rejected, isolated. They feel like they failed somehow, or they fear death. There are several characteristics common to most crises. There's the presence of opportunity and danger. It's important to remember that change causes crisis and crisis causes change. So we can use this crisis as an opportunity to promote change. But while someone's in crisis, they have increasing levels of anxiety, which can lead to violent reactions. Crises are also complicated. It's not simple. Jim Bob didn't wake up in the morning and decide to go take a whole bank hostage for no apparent reason, or just for one reason. There's generally a lot more to it than that. Precipitating events may impact many different areas of life. For example, maybe he lost his job, which led to him losing his house, which led to him losing his wife, which led him to act out in desperation to try to get someone's attention because he didn't feel anybody was listening to him. That was the main storyline on the show I watched last night, but it underscores the point. There are no panaceas or quick fixes. This is a crisis. This isn't, oops, I got a boo-boo and I'm going to put a Band-Aid on it. It's not a quick fix. There are things we can do that can provide temporary, immediate relief, and we can help people ensure they don't make the problem worse. But most of the time, if people are in a state of true crisis, it's not as easy as turning on a light switch. There's a lot of things that have to be done and a lot of considerations that have to be taken to make the right choice and find the right fix. There's a necessity of choice in crisis. Remember, we said there's an opportunity, and that's true. But we also have to make a choice to do the next right thing. Making a choice requires an action. Choosing not to act is still a choice. Don't think too hard on that one. Choosing not to do something is an action in and of itself because you're choosing to continue the current pattern of behavior. But making a choice does require some sort of movement. There are some different types of crises. Developmental crises are normal or abnormal events causing a dramatic change. Situational crises, this tends to be more what we see in people who have crises. Their wife left them, they got fired from their job, something like that happened. Existential crisis are anxieties arising from questions of purpose, responsibility, independence, or commitment. Existential crises tend to pop up more for people who are diagnosed with a terminal illness or for people who are elderly and really reviewing what they've done with their life. But that's not always true. You can see existential crises in younger people. And ecosystemic crises or disasters. Think about the earthquake in Haiti. Think about the floods in Australia. Think about 9/11. There are a lot of different disasters or crises in the ecosystem, in the world around us, that directly impact us. Models of crisis intervention. Equilibrium and stabilization. We want to get them just kind of on an even keel so we can help them figure out what to do. Cognitive is to gain control by helping them change their thinking. Are they making the most rational decision right now? Is what they're doing going to make it worse or make it better? What are other options? This is problem solving, brainstorming, supportively confronting some irrational beliefs. REBT and reality therapy are very useful for this. Or psychosocial crisis intervention, in which we assess the internal and external exacerbating and mitigating factors. What is there within the person and in the environment, in their social support system, that makes the situation worse? We don't want to bring that in. And what is it that makes it better? We want to bring that in. We want to bring in the helpers and push out the hurters for a while. And choose workable alternatives. During the period of crisis, this is trying to get the person into a place where they're stable and they're not hurting so much that they can't think straight. We may have to do some things that we can't maintain for a long time. Temporary housing, temporary placement, temporary hospitalization. Important points. Danger and opportunity. Really, really remember that it's always dangerous, but there is so much opportunity here because the person is motivated to make a change. They are hurting so bad, it has got to stop. Time limited, but it may be recurring. We all know clients that have these recurring crises that aren't just borderlines. So be aware that you'll have another opportunity to help the person change. And remember that helping them change doesn't mean making it all better. If one is, my life is awful and I want to die, and 5 is, my life is grand, if you can move them to a 2, you've had a good day, week, or month's work. So you need to help them keep stepping forward instead of stepping backward. Crisis is complex. It may be that there's a psychosocial stressor, something in their relationships or at work or their finances, which triggered this crisis. But it has reverberations in their relationships with other people, in their thought patterns, and in generally their emotions. So we need to remember there's a lot of different things going on. Life experiences of workers enhances their effectiveness. Now this is crisis workers. If you take a 18-year-old who has had very little life experience, they've led a very sheltered life, they may have more difficulty wrapping their head around some of the fears, anxieties, losses, etc. of a 60-year-old man who just got laid off from his job and lost his house. Not to say that they can't be effective, but they will probably have a greater depth of connection with the consumer if they have a broader range of experiences. And it's important to remember that crisis causes people to make choices. They can either stay the course and keep doing what they've been doing and hope they get different results, which in substance abuse we call the definition of insanity, or they can make a choice to try something different, even if it's scary or unpleasant or hard, because it might just help. Now, as with all interventions, we have to consider cultural competence. There is no one normal range of behaviors. And an individual is not necessarily the basic building block of society. So telling people to tell their family to go jump in a lake, if their family's dysfunctional, may not be the correct response for someone from a culture that values family unity and is interdependent instead of independent. Problem definitions can be interdisciplinary, even if the worker is not. When I do evaluations, I can identify when my clients are experiencing some issues because of depression, because of hypothyroid. I know when I read that medical write-up that that's going to impact their depression. Now, I'm not a doctor, not a medical doctor, but I need to be aware of how medical issues, social issues, mental health, cognitive issues, all those things play in. And I need to seek consultation if I don't know. Especially when you're working with someone who's on psychotropics or on a lot of medications for physical health problems. You need to be aware. Pain medications tend to be depressants. So if you have somebody who's depressed and in a lot of pain and taking Percocet all the time, there might be a connection. Not to say that they have to get off their Percocet, but it's important to realize that that may be contributing something to it. So you may need to work with a medical doctor to evaluate that. Language is not always interpreted in the same way. There are colloquialisms, tones of voice, certain things that you may say that someone may not understand or they may take offense to. Try to use language that is pretty general. The value of independence and dependency varies between people and cultures, and not everything can be explained in a linear fashion. We can't always say that A produced B or X led to Y. We must accommodate the client's needs and remember that past history impacts current events. So in the past, if somebody has said they were going to help and then they dropped the ball, what do you think the person is going to expect this time when you say, I'm going to help you? They're going to expect you to drop the ball. Even if it wasn't you who dropped the ball the first time, you can thank the prior person for creating a harder road for you to go. And be aware of personal assumptions. There's a gentleman, I think his name's Ted right now, the man with the golden voice, who's a homeless man who had this God-given gift of having a radio voice. And you see him, and he's a homeless man standing on the side of the road with a cardboard thing. What are your personal assumptions? What's reality? Do you assume he's a bad person? Do you assume he's a good person? Do you assume that he has nothing to offer because he's not the most attractive man in the world, and he's homeless, and he hasn't taken a bath in a week? Or do you give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that since he's human, he may have something to offer? When we assess crises, we want to assess severity on a high, medium, or low scale, or a 3-2-1 scale, whatever makes you happy. But we want to assess the following dimensions. Anger and hostility, is it high, medium, or low? Anxiety and fear, high, medium, or low? And sadness or melancholy, high, medium, or low? If they're angry and hostile and highly anxious, then they're just waiting to explode, especially towards you. Anger and fear mixed together tends to produce some lashing out. Anxiety and sadness, or anger and sadness put together, leads more to self-harm often, but that's a general rule. So you want to figure out exactly how emotionally liable is this person right now, because that tells you how dangerous the situation is. Behavioral, again, high, medium, or low. How much are they approaching the situation? How much proactive movement are they making? Are they in a hostage situation? They've taken hostages. That's pretty active. That's pretty approaches. Are they, killing hostages? Or are they releasing hostages? Are they trying to avoid having a confrontation with you? Are they saying bring it on? Or are they trying to avoid a confrontation? Or are they immobile? Do they just have no idea what to do? And or are they trapped? If they're immobile, they can either mentally not know what to do and feel trapped, Or you may have them pinned down, in which they feel trapped. And we all know that when we feel trapped, we tend to become more protective or aggressive, whether it be towards you or to themselves. This is a nice, handy little check sheet to have, because you don't remember this in the heat of a crisis, to kind of pull out and go high, 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 low, high, and try to figure out where you're at with regard to your own safety, the person's safety, and the need for extreme measures in order to end the situation. We also want to talk about cognitive, high, medium, or low. What type of issues are they concerned about? Transgression, somebody did them wrong, high, medium, or low. If they already feel betrayed, you've got a tough road ahead of you. Threat, if they feel threatened in some way, or they feel like their children are threatened in some way. Again, long road to hoe. Loss, this tends to be another one where they're not acting out towards others. They feel such a sense of hurt and despair that they tend to act impulsively and destructively towards themselves, but not always. Loss of a home, for example. If they feel like somebody took their home from them, that could be perceived as both a transgression and a loss. And we need to look at the domain, their physical issues. High, medium, or low? Are they in a lot of pain? Are there physical crises going on? Are there psychological crises going on? Are they still in touch with reality? Are they having severe depression? Social. High crisis would be their wife just left them, or they just moved to a new place and they don't know anybody and they feel completely isolated, or they're being bullied at school and nobody understands them. And moral or spiritual crisis. They may feel like they have done something totally morally wrong, or they may have given up hope that a higher power exists, that hopelessness. So we need to look at what the type of the issue is, whether it was somebody did them wrong, or is threatening them, or they experienced a loss, and what domain or domains they feel the most pain in right now. Then you total your scores. How many highs, how many mediums, and how many lows. That will give you an idea, again, of where your crisis threat level is at. Please read the following book, Client Safety and Crisis Intervention. It helps you define the problem, ensure client safety, provide support, examine alternatives, work with the client to make plans, and successfully obtain commitment for positive change. If you click on the hyperlink, you'll be taken to the Google Books version of this book, where you can preview it. In summary, change causes crisis. Crisis is a state of extreme anxiety. It's important to be able to see where the client is coming from or hear what the client is saying. Help the client reestablish equilibrium. Identify environmental and social supports. Develop a plan and take action. When in crisis, clients may act out against themselves or others. It's important to ensure your office and common areas are free from potential weapons. Develop a safety plan for your exit, removing bystanders and other staff, and aiding clients in need. And never make promises you cannot keep.